Hello, welcome to this week's edition of the Turning Points podcast. Today we get to speak with the lovely Nikki Walton. What a sweetheart, what a sincere and just, genuine person. I loved listening to her and you two connect on a lot of the, commonalities you've had with your spiritual teachers and in India, and it was a really good podcast.
Yeah, Nikki Walton is a force to be reckoned with, I say. She has a podcast called the New Growth Podcast. That's how I found her and reached out to her, and she was so kind to respond to me because this girl, she's got stuff going on. She's busy, but she's grounded and very articulate on her spiritual journey. She's interviewed Sad Guru Jaggi Vasudev, who's a very well-known guru in India, Rupert Spira, Byron, Krishna, and apparently she was on the Dr. Oz show just the other day. So she became famous with her website CurlyNikki, which helps Black women with their hair. And then now she's sharing her spiritual journey, which we talk all about in this podcast. So many turning points she has, and she is just a love. You will, I'm sure, love her as much as we enjoyed talking to her and connecting.
Yes, I hope you enjoy.
Hello, Nikki Walton. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about spirituality.
Yeah, that's our favorite topic too. That's basically why we created a podcast, because Sean and I can talk for hours until 3 o'clock in the morning about this stuff. So kindred spirit with you. All right, so we will start off with our special question, which is many seekers can recall that point in time when they started to question their so-called reality that they were taught, maybe a turning point of conditioned beliefs and believing them. So do you remember when you became a seeker?
I was young, somewhere between 5 and 7. I hated to go to bed at night because I'd sit up in anxiety. I know now that it was anxiety. I was very fearful of death. I had seen it in movies and shows and heard it alluded to, and I'd never been to a funeral or anything, but just the idea of no longer existing. And then worse, the idea of losing my parents or my grandparents. So I would sit up at night, every single night, with that fear. And I was raised Catholic. And so my parents would take me to the priest, and I don't even remember the meetings, but my mom does. And she's like, you ask all these questions, like, who is God and where is God? And we went in that airplane and I didn't see Jesus. And and the priest had nothing. They had no answers. So that went on for a while. And by the age of 10, I was in the New Age aisle at the library and at the bookstores, reading about out-of-body experiences and everything. Everything I could get my hands on. I was that kid that was reading Stephen King, anything that was supernatural, I was reading. And it grew into college, checking out Buddhism. And then from there, non-duality, thank God, into Nisargadatta Maharaj and Ramana Maharshi. So it started as a kid, just fear.
Do you see what's behind me?
That's the first face I saw when I got on with you guys today. I was like, I see you. Thank you for that, Darshan. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I've been going to India for 21 years.
Oh my gosh. I've only been one time.
I heard you went to Mumbai.
Yeah.
And you're going to come back.
Absolutely. I cannot wait.
Yeah.
Cannot wait.
Okay, so how did you get into non-duality? Because I find it so interesting because, my mom was sort of into all this mystical stuff, but more the duality stuff, right?
Yes.
And so, I was fortunate enough to find Deepak, who was into Ramana and Nisargadatta and all that, and that's how I sort of got into it all. But people get lost. I feel like they get lost in that, especially in spirituality and sort of that transcendent state of the psychics and the tarot cards and all that stuff.
Crystals, everything,
right? Which is fine. It's fun and it's a stage and there's nothing wrong with it. But I want to hear because that's a pretty big change there.
Yeah, it is. So I came in the door via the law of attraction. It was 2008, 2009. And I was pregnant and I had just launched a website called CurlyNikki.com. And I no longer wanted to have to go into work to like make money. I wanted to be able to stay home and make money so I could raise my family from the comfort of my own home. So I would walk every day and I'd have a mantra, like, I don't even remember it anymore, but I'd say like, I don't have to go to work to make money. I make lots of money doing what I love from home. I did that for about 6 months. And by the end of my pregnancy, that was my reality. And it continues to be so today. But maybe a few years into that, I wrote my first book. It was a bestseller. It hit the lists, most of them, except for the one that I wanted, that I had been vision boarding and affirming, the New York Times bestsellers list. And I was devastated, like completely through the floor. And I'm like, this is not healthy or normal. It's okay to be disappointed, but this broken is bizarre. And so I reached out to Tracy Ellis Ross, who I had just done a party with in New York through L'Oreal. And I explained what was going on and I'm sobbing into the phone. And she told me, she's like, you can't keep playing in the kiddie end of the pool. Like you have to go deeper. You've already gone far, but you clearly haven't reached truth. And so she pointed me to Deepak. She pointed me to Eckhart Tolle. And from there, since I'm like, I have that kind of mind, it's not like I can just read Michael Singer's book, Untethered Soul, and be like, okay, that's it. No, my mind is like, we got to triangulate this. Who did he read? Where did his teachers come from? Who were their teachers? And so from Michael Singer and like Eckhart Tolle, it was 600 books later. And even though like maybe 100 books in, I knew what it was. I had already had a glimpse, like in 2013, right after that whole thing with the New York Times, I had the presence announced itself here. And so I began just practicing it, noticing it, feeling for it, and recognizing that, oh, it's not like I have to get happy and be happy and excited. There's a natural, peaceful joy that's always here as long as I'm quiet enough to turn toward it. And then later I found there's no Nikki to turn toward it. It just is. And that's more what I am than this. But all of that to say, Tracy Ellis Ross pointed me in the right direction. And I ran down that path, collecting books and teachers. But Ramana Maharshi's teachings were clear. And even though I didn't truly get the question immediately, the inquiry, it felt right. And so I would ask it almost like a mantra. And then, of course, I kept reading and kept practicing. I'm like, it's not a mantra. I believe the answer is the silence that follows the question, so then I'd stay in that quiet and I could see the shift from being Nikki to being presence. And saying that reminds me that from Ramana, I found Rupert, Spira and like Muji, who helped to explain those questions even more. And yeah, it's just been a very beautiful blossoming. And there's new things I learn or unlearn every day. And I went from, Advaita, to Bhakti apparently last year. So there's a lot of chanting that happens here now, watching the chanter. So I didn't see that coming either, but that happened in about May of last year. And I've been, it's, I can't even tell you. It's just been a beautiful process.
Man, there's a lot to unpack on those. But I liked the learning and the unlearning part of it. That's a key ingredient that I don't know if I didn't get it at first either. It's you think, and again, like this is such an example of having that thirst for the wisdom, for the light, for whatever words you want to use. There's a thirst there for understanding and knowing, and it's interesting how you can collect so much, and in that collecting of things and that collecting of knowledge, you start to build even, almost stronger, higher walls of identity with those things until you realize, oh shit, I got to unlearn some things. And that's kind of what we focus on is the programming. When did you become aware of some of this programming? How did it interact with you while you were seeking? And then now I'm in this kind of like deprogramming stage. This podcast has been, huge for me and like deconstructing a lot of bullshit in my system. Now, you said you were pregnant when you were going through that manifestation process. How many kids did you have? What was the process like while you were seeking, in this kind of new mindset?
So my daughter, when I had my awakening, which was in 2013 after the New York Times thing. I just had the one child, and she was 3. And then I had Max in 2017. And so I had Max when there was a point in the beginning of 2017 where I was seeking so hard. The thirst was so strong. Like at the time, my ex was like, what are you looking for? He's like, I know people go on these spiritual journeys and I've seen it. He said, but you do everything so extreme. And this is extreme. Like it's all consuming. So it was, but I was blessed enough to have the work that allowed me to be home. I had just written a book for L'Oreal. So, I had a really nice payday, which meant that I could spend my time on this, on practicing, on sitting and being. And there would be moments when my ego would come up and say, you're contributing nothing to society. Like, you got to work on your next project. You have to do something. Yeah. And then as I would sit in the quiet, I'm like, I'm being, and this is necessary for what's next. There was a clarity often that this is necessary for what's next. And I also have a wonderful support system. Even now, my parents help with the kids. I've always been blessed. It's almost like I've been protected and guided this way, even though I do have a family, we're a very close-knit family. I have the time and the space. And here, because of like the pandemic, I've started waking up earlier. So I have more time since the kids are here with me all day, every day, for more than a year now. I now wake up at 5. So my practice is from 5 to 7. And then of course, all day while I'm awake, but dedicated formal sitting. Yeah. And it's like 123 days in, and everything has changed in just these 3 months, like inside and out too. And yeah, it's like it's prioritized itself. That's what happened. It prioritized itself.
That's awesome. And isn't it funny how, you're at home with your first child and even the ego at that point is saying, when are you going to be an asset to society?
Yes.
You're doing the absolute most important thing that you could be doing, which is being in your new baby's life and just experiencing that together. And it's funny how, because I've had similar programming. I mean, Corinne can attest to this in so many ways where I went out and I sought out things to do for my family instead of being there for my family.
Yes, same. Like, what are you doing?
Exactly. But our culture, and I don't know how much of this is the outer culture or our inner culture or just that mechanism that's trying to distract us, right?
Yes.
And how much of that is just, it wants to deter us from that present moment. Always. And I think that's a funny point. It's like, yeah, you were doing the best thing you could. And Jack Kornfield, I've been talking about this podcast of Jack Kornfield and Tim Ferriss. And Jack talked about, there's no greater guru or teacher than children in your life.
That is so true. That is so powerful.
And it sounds like you were able to, you focused on it, you took time, you had the means, and you just spent the time to dive into yourself, dive into your family, and focus on that at that time. That's amazing, man. Not a lot of people do that.
It felt so necessary. And my son, who's 4 now, he is so aware. Like, my daughter is on some levels too. Like, little boy, when he wakes up in the morning, the other day he was like, my eyes are open again. I'm like, who says that? Like, it's a very strange thing to say. And then the other day he said something that was alarming at first because of my programming. He said, can I do anything I want with my body? And I'm like, what does that mean? What? And, before I could even jump to the conclusion, he's like, when I want to move my arm, I move it. And he's like, and I can touch my nose. And I'm like, yeah, that's a high level of awareness. Like, I guess because he hangs out with me all day in this love. But yeah.
I love that, man. My 9-year-old just asked me the other day, she asked if she can use swear words in her head. I was like, I guess. I don't know the answer to that. So I can relate to that for sure, man.
Well, I was talking, since we're talking about kids here, and I don't have, I have kids in India, but I don't have my own that came out of this body. And so I was talking to Eddie, who we've had on the podcast before, and her grandson said to her the other day, where do you see spirits? And she thought for a second. He says, and you should hear Eddie because she can do the little lisp that he has. Not ghosts, Grandma, not ghosts. I'm talking about the spirit. to spew it, but there's a spirit outside and the spirit inside. The spirit outside and spirit inside, he said. He's 5.
Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids are a trip. If you start listening and paying attention enough, which you should, because when you're a parent, you should, it's amazing, like the kind of, profound wisdom that comes out of that innocence, right? Because like you said, like the programming wanted to shut down, and there's plenty of times, there's plenty of programming that would shut down. Oh no, there's no spirits out. There's no ghosts. There's none of that. No, don't do anything with your body. You got to be controlled. Like that's the instinct, is to guide them towards a programming. And I think that's when it really starts to set in, in a big way for kids, is all those little moments, those microcosm moments of interacting with the wisdom that is innate with them, because they're pure and untainted by life and society. And we immediately go to our programming and then inflict that programming on them. So it's a tightrope walk, man. It's such a trip to, life is hard. Anyways.
Humaning is hard.
Humaning.
Coming back to, so 2008, that's when you start to deep dive a little bit more?
2013. So 2008 was like a deep dive into law of attraction. 2013 was I'm introduced to truth, like a deeper truth. 2017, 2013, introduced to the deeper truth, practicing head on. 2013 to 2017, it's like a full-time job. It's all I do. 2017, I was introduced to practicing the presence of God, the Brother Lawrence teachings, which I had never known that there was a Christian side to, there was non-dual Christianity. That completely missed me until about 2017. I thought everyone was what I had learned when I was a kid in a Catholic church. And oddly enough, I went back to midnight mass in 2019, and the priest that I grew up with, knowing, during the service, had the lights go down in the church and was like, I want everyone to meditate and just come into the presence of the Christ within, of that love within. And I was like, one eye open, what does he talk? This is amazing. So after the service was over, I went up to him and I'm like, Father Bob, how long have you been aware of this presence, of this Christ within? Because I had never heard you talk about that ever. And he's like, too long to even count, Nikki. Just kind of poo-pooed it like it was nothing. And I'm like, maybe I couldn't hear, and that teaching was always there and I just couldn't hear the message yet. So finding the non-dual Christian sect was interesting, and reading all of these different monks' teachings and the way of the pilgrim, and it was beautiful to kind of rediscover. I knew I was born into the religion I was born into for a reason. So it's I went full circle, but it's the same message, that there's a love here. No matter what you call it, it existed before language did. So just be that. Just be that.
Yeah. And how has been the integration? Because I just am so in admiration of what you did, that you wanted to stay home and create the business and create CurlyNikki. The website's amazing, and you've done so much with that. And what from my perspective, from my small perspective of just finding you on your podcast and then doing some research and reaching out to you, from my perspective, I'm seeing you created this amazing platform. And now you're shifting and growing, and you're starting to want to share that with that and platform and more. You're sort of transitioning to that. Is that what's happening?
Absolutely. So 2017, again, I was like, I've got to share this. Although I wrote in my journal, I still have a journal, please God, don't make me share this light publicly. I don't want people to think I'm crazy, because my audience, we're Black women that were raised Christian, and most of the folks that I know are still very much in the church, and Jesus is, outside and someone we pray to, and, to take that power and bring it here is very foreign, so I was terrified to share what I had found. But just like with the natural hair space, what CurlyNikki is known for, I had to. It was I was being forced to. It was spilling over. And just like I wanted to help Black women find freedom through accepting their natural hair, I want to help people, all beings find this love, this anchor, for freedom from this, from suffering, to alleviate suffering. That's my mission. And I've been sharing on Instagram just about every day. I have the podcast, which was like the newest endeavor. And on CurlyNikki.com, even though the content is still heavy natural hair, the pieces that are from me, that are written by me, it's this. I have one setting. This is the only setting. This is the only thing I can talk about. I was on Dr. Oz a couple of days ago and finally got to talk about this. I was talking like this on the Dr. Oz show. And I'm like, thank you. It's amazing. And I know, like I said earlier before we started recording even, that it's all spiritual. Like nothing is more or less spiritual. But this feels very much more in alignment to be able to speak about this than just only talk about outer beauty all the time.
Or especially in alignment with who you are now, because who you are then, that was where you were. And so it's obviously your nature to share your journey. That's what I'm getting.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm curious if, it sounds like you had a pretty explosive career where it took off and may have got on its own trajectory before you were ready for it to necessarily be on that trajectory. To a certain degree, have you struggled with a certain identity with the business, with CurlyNikki, and then there's your, let's say, real life, like obviously it's all your real life, but was there some separation anxiety or maybe a joining anxiety involved in that for you?
Yeah, in 2017, after writing the second book for L'Oreal, I wanted to run from CurlyNikki, the brand, the website, the whole everything. Like I was trying to distance myself from it as much as possible. I also had a very challenging relationship with my business partners. Even though the relationship helped me have, like freedom and have my time, it was very traumatizing. But I appreciate it because I could see during those years between like 2010 and 2018, I needed that to push me further inside because there was nowhere else to go and nothing else to do but to feel this presence and have that as an anchor while dealing with people that were toxic. So yeah, I ran from it seemed, like egoically, but it kept reasserting itself. It kept coming. And just recently, some opportunities presented themselves, which allowed me to be interviewed by like the Breakfast Club. And, there's a feature in People, I think today, and like Teen Vogue, and the website is in my full ownership again as of last year. And I'm posting on it regularly again. And I was just talking to my mom. I'm like, it's really weird how things are. It's like I'm running as fast as I can. And I stop and it's like, here's the website. I've relaunched on a new platform. It's a lot. But so now I'm embracing it and recognizing that whereas before, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, I'd say, oh, I'm only doing transcendent beauty, like not even inner beauty. I'm transcending beauty. And at some point, I forget which teacher I was talking to, but it was definitely a teacher. It wasn't even like, it's all your higher self. It's all yourself. But it wasn't even like just sitting in meditation and this came. I was speaking with another seeming individual and they told me there's no difference between inner and outer or transcendent. It's all the one, no matter what your mind tries to tell you. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. So trying to just bring it all back together instead of piecing things out. It's like I'm practicing non-duality, but in my day-to-day life, it's still like, nope, that's in that category and that's over there. And this is spirituality right here. So bringing everything back in is what I've been doing for the last probably like 8 to 12 months. And in the last 3 months with my waking up at 5-ish in the morning and doing this more formal practice and continuing to practice just being love during the day, the CurlyNikki brand and everything around it is becoming even more pronounced. And it's bizarre, all of it. I wrote a whole book. There's a whole book that got written between January and February for the co-author. I've been very productive, but I'm tired physically. But this energy is popping. Like it's here. It's here.
It's a wave.
Tell us about that book that I'm very curious about because of what are you writing about now?
Well, I'm sure you could guess what this is. I can't tell you too much, but I can tell you that my co-author heard my interview with Rupert. He reposted it on his platform, and because she wouldn't have bumped into me on mine yet. So she bumped into me on his platform on Facebook, maybe with a reposting. And she's like, who is this Black woman talking to Rupert about non-duality? She's like, we're unicorns. She's from the US, but she lives off the coast of West Africa right now, off the map, writing books, chilling, looking at the ocean, and mountains every day. And so she reached out and we talked like we're talking. And by the end of the conversation, I had shared a book project that I had been wanting to do, but I'm so busy I hadn't had a chance to. And she's like, all I have is time. And I'm like, all right, hold me to it. And she held me to it the way you held me to, getting on the schedule. She held me to writing this book and redid it. And now we're shopping it.
Oh, wow. That's one of the things. Well, I love actually many things about social media and these times, these technological times we're in. I don't look at the negative. I don't feed into the negative. I just look at that because I've connected with people as well. I mean, that's how I found you. Actually, I did find you on Rupert's.
Wow.
That's how I found you. And then I went to yours and listened to some others as well. But that's how I found you.
I've met some great people through Rupert already. Really.
Yeah, well, he's in that world, right? So that's the people that are listening to him, and it's been merging and melding, your worlds, and the people that know you that want to come along, that are intrigued, they'll be there, and the ones or they might find it 3 years or 5, doesn't matter. It's like
exactly.
Yeah. So you've co-written this book with this writer that you haven't met in person.
Haven't met her.
So beautiful.
We won't get over here until later this year, due to the pandemic. But she is very similar to me, just about the same age, had very young experiences with like question asking and, just wondering like, what is the nature of this reality? And why does everyone seem to be acting? Everyone is acting poorly. Like no one is happy. And so she's more of like Zen and I'm more Bhakti. And we brought that together in a beautiful book.
That I'm very excited about that because that's a really good combination too. I mean, I learned many years ago in my experience was that it all does become one. Yes. Eventually, there is sort of more, maybe what you're calling Zen, more the Jnani path, more the intellect, and there's the Bhakti, more the heart, there's the karma, more the service, but then they do merge eventually all into one. I mean, that's been my experience with my path anyway.
Ram Dass's mantra, I am loving awareness. And he's like, the love is Bhakti, right? And the awareness is consciousness or Zen or Advaita, Vedanta. So.
Yeah. And you interviewed Krishna Das.
Yes, that was one of my favorite interviews. Rupert is probably still my top because we have very similar approaches. But Krishna Das is a fave. He's a friend. I message him all the time. I'm sure I get on his nerves. Whenever I have like any kind of mini revelation, I'll send a note and he always replies. And it's usually just like, Ram Ram, bless you.
Well, when he went with his guru, I mean, he irritated the crap out of his guru too. So.
Yeah. His book, Krishna Das, of all the books that I've read probably in the last 2 years, his book, Chants of a Lifetime, is my favorite because if you haven't read it, and for y'all at home, if you haven't read it, get that book. And he just did an Audible recently. It is the spiritual journey in like 180, 200 pages. And it's so beautifully written. And the love, you can feel the love like in every sentence. It's beautiful.
Have you learned the Hanuman Chalisa yet?
Of course. I told you 2020 was a weird year for me. It was a strange year. I had always known about, so since 2013, when I got started with the deep dive, I look back on my Amazon order list. That's how I keep up with where I was and what I was doing in my life and my spiritual journey. So 2013, the first book I bought, actually even before Power of Now, was Be Here Now. And I've repurchased it like 4 times over the years. And usually in hindsight, at times when I was transitioning in my life, like making a big move or something major was about to happen, it's like that book preceded it by a week or 2. And so I actually got the book in February of 2020, had no idea what was coming in March. And I bought the book to gift to someone. But of course, whenever it comes into my conscious awareness, I have to flip through, take a couple of cute pictures because it's so beautiful. And I gave the book away. And then something inspired me to write. I live on an island, a barrier island here in Florida. And there's one church on the island, a teacher. I went on a silent retreat in 2018, and he told me that I should teach and that I should call the presence beauty, that I should start sharing this presence and call it beauty since that's my background. I'm like, I don't know. 2 years later, February 2020, I reached out to a pastor here on the island and asked if I could come in and share these teachings. Even though it's not very Christian, it can be related to Christianity. We can talk about meditative prayer, prayer of the breath. And she's like, I'm for it. So I was doing that right before the pandemic. And I also had reached out to Deepak Chopra's team and Ram Dass's team to see if there was any way for me to offer like virtual meditation. And right after the pandemic hit, I got a message back from Ram Dass's team, and they wanted to have a conversation, a Zoom call, and we talked, and it was great. And he's like, I don't need you to lead any meditations. You don't even do that often, but you want to do a podcast? And I'm like, yes, I don't even listen to them. I don't even really know what they are, but sure, sounds like fun. And so we talked a little bit more, and he said, I'm going to send you a gift. And he didn't tell me what the gift was going to be. But about maybe 4 weeks later, a mala came in the mail. And I hadn't chanted or done any kind of mantra work since 2018, which was another like a transition that I had in my life. I was doing a lot of chanting. And so when that mala came and it had a thread on it from Maharaji, their guru's blanket, I'm like, this is a sign. I love gifts that are like, for practice. So I started doing Ram. That was my practice from like, I'd say late April, May of 2020 until about July or August of 2020. Ram all day, sing. And that's when Krishna Das entered my conscious awareness again. I had heard him in 2018 when I was chanting last. I did not like his voice, did not like the song. I liked Muji's music better at the time. I heard him again, Krishna Das, in 2020, and I'm like, this is amazing. And that's all I listen to now. I still love Coldplay and like Beyonce, but music that I listen to all day, that's always in my ear or playing loudly in my room, is kirtan music. It's Krishna Das all day. And so I had learned the Maha Mantra and the Hanuman Chalisa before probably October of last year, just from singing along to the music all day. But I did not know that I knew the Maha Mantra. Like, I didn't know that I knew Hare Krishna, because a lot of the songs from Krishna Das, he starts with Hare Ram. And so I never connected the two. And so then at some point in like October of last year, I came across Hare Krishna documentary, and I had never even heard of that movement or all the issues that came up after it. Like, I completely missed all of that. But I found it interesting that they had a very formal practice of like 16 rounds of a mantra every morning. And I'm like, I need discipline. That helps me a lot. But when I heard it, I'm like, there's no way I could do 16 words on every beat 108 times, 16 times around. That's insane. And then like less than a month after hearing about it, I started doing it. And I've been doing it ever since like November 28th. And everything has changed. So I still sing all day. I chant sometimes to myself, like japa in my head. But I sit every morning for 16 rounds, and I sit every night for 4 rounds.
And that's, sorry, Sean, and that's why you want to go to North India, I'm assuming. Yeah. I was there two or three. I mean, I go to South India mostly, but I've been to North India 3 or 4 times, and I was at the Krishna, Vrindavan and all those places.
I want to go to Vrindavan. I want to go to Kanchi Dham.
Yeah, Kanchi Dham I've been. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I can't wait.
Rishikesh it's a little, I mean, it's pretty yoga. It's pretty full of commercial yoga, unfortunately, now.
Yeah, I was afraid of that. That's why I was like, maybe Rishikesh isn't on my list, but I know those other places are.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go through to get to Kanchi Dham. You kind of have to go through Rishikesh anyway, and then Vrindavan's not far away from there. But it is worth going, just the vibe there. Yeah. You know, I was there the first time in the year 2000. That was the time to go. And it was amazing, and there wasn't too many people there yet, and you know, so that's what I focus on, is the Ganga there is running clear and clean, and that's beautiful. Especially you just drive up just a couple of miles up the river and do that, but the trip to Kanchi Dham, that's intense.
I'm already working on the anxiety that I had when I was in Mumbai. I had never experienced traffic like that in my life. Like every time it was time to go somewhere, I could feel that familiar energy, like rising in my belly. I'm like, I don't want to leave where we are right now to get back on treacherous roads. So yes, I'm already aware that it's going to be tough because I'm not going to be in one place. I'm going to want to travel once I get to India. So
and
when it's time, I'll be there. And
you'll be great. You'll be great. And to me, that's why I've been going to India for 21 years, is because it's so uncomfortable. And it's really helped me ground me to be, sort of just okay with wherever I'm at, no matter what the outer circumstances are. That's been my main training ground, really. I mean, Ramana, he did it for me. I mean, I've been living in Arunachala, the home of Ramana Maharshi, for...
Yeah, no, I wanted to be there as well.
Yeah, we've got, my ex-husband is Indian, and we're best friends, and we have the kids together. We've got an orphanage there in Tiruvannamalai. We've got 23 kids. Actually, there's 28 now. We just got 5 new. It's always changing. Wow. And we have a little boutique, little guest house at the base of the mountain. So you have to come stay at Sunshine.
Oh, that's amazing. So before COVID, that's where I was headed. Whenever when I was going back to India, I was going to Arunachala because that's my teacher. He's been my teacher. And then all of a sudden, Ram Dass and Maharaji happened. So now I have multiple other stops to make.
It's all, yeah. It's all the same. I love all of them too. And but Arunachala is very. I knew we had that connection from when I heard you talk, because Arunachala is just, Arunachala. In fact, when I was in a yoga class years ago, I didn't realize how powerful the yoga teacher said, now, whatever vision of God or a higher power, just whatever the first thing that comes to your mind, think of that. And Arunachala was right here, like the point here, and it was here in my chest. And I was like, wow, okay. Yeah.
David Godman, I've annoyed the hell out of him as well. At some point, he just stops replying, and then maybe a few months later, I'll send a note and he'll reply to that one. I actually, I asked him for an interview, and he was like, "I live in India. This internet is not it. So good luck." But no, I'm gonna have to respectfully decline. But yeah, I've interviewed him, or I've questioned him often over the years, just sending little notes. Trying to see, is this it? He's like, if it's not the same awareness at 3 a.m. that you have at 3 p.m., it ain't it. I'm like, damn it.
That's great that you have. It is awesome to have people to talk to, and I've had several people over the years like that, and actually sent you a link when I first emailed you to Werner, who was our very first. Was he our first interview, Sean, on our podcast 4 months ago? And he's one of my teachers from India. He's been living in India for 45 years. He's a Swiss guy. Living in India 45 years, and he's been living in Arunachala for 25 years, and he spent, many of that years in silence in the caves in India, in Arunachala.
That's amazing.
So he's totally awake, and he lives in a sarong, all day. His story is incredible, and I have access to him, which is.
So cool. Well, whenever you go back, I'm going back with you. I told the same to the Ram Dass team. I'm like, don't go without me. I need to be there with folks that know what they're doing. They're traveling between cities.
Yeah, no, I've been taking people to India for 13 years now, every annually.
Oh, nice.
And it's always yoga, chanting, meditation, and some shopping and massage too. Oh, and I love it. I love seeing India through the eyes of people, and I'm very I loved, even though it's like herding cats sometimes, I still love to see it, because people's shit comes up all over the place. And I love, and I'm good at just staying calm and helping them see the reflection and the lesson. And people will they'll be sure it's the damn beds or the food or the parasite or whatever it is. They'll be sure that's it, and I'm like, it's not it. It's not what it is. But you can think that for now if you want to.
That's fine if you want to blame that on that. That was my practice for so long. In those transformative years for me, 2017 until 2019, I would say I'm not upset for the reason I think. I'm upset because I forgot peace, because I forgot God, because I'm not feeling the presence. And then in that moment, whatever it was, the legs got cut out from under it, and I could see through it and feel the joy that was there.
Yeah, man, it's the mindfulness practice, and I think that's why there are so many different avenues to developing that relationship with that piece that you're talking about. And that was actually going to be my question after you mentioned starting the new mantra, I guess, meditation. How has that changed your relationship with that peace, with that awareness? And you mentioned a while ago that, your spiritual community, kind of, you're maybe not an outcast, but kind of on the outskirts of that. Now that you've done a couple talks, you have a podcast, you have this new meditation, how is your relationship with your family's spiritual background and your culture's spiritual background changed, or how's that changed in you?
Yeah. So for my family, they were practicing Catholics, but since my close family and we all moved here to Florida, nobody really goes to church, and they've watched the change. My mom was like, from 2019 till today, she was like, you were already different in 2019. She was like, but she's like, I've seen so much change. I mean, I don't eat meat, I don't drink, I don't date, I don't do anything but this, it's like completely changed everything. But as far as like my community, the larger community, I think it's interesting because there's been changes that I haven't even like affected. So a very close cousin of mine who I hadn't talked to in 6 months, I called her out of the blue a couple of days ago, and she's sharing about like Kundalini rising. I'm like, oh, she's on a journey. This is amazing. But then she's like, yeah, and I was chanting Ram, Ram, Ram. And I'm like, I must have told her about this. And then I'm like, did I tell you? And she's like, no, we've never talked about this. And I'm like, this is so weird. And I have like cousins and other friends that are finding their way on this path too. So it just feels like, obviously it's all one, but like on this plane, it feels like soulmates, where we've all kind of had our life experiences. I'm in my mid to late 30s and she is too. And we haven't been in close, like conscious communication, but clearly there's something there because she had found her way to Krishna Das without me. And my children, they watch me. I don't push anything on them. The only thing that I do kind of push is that there's a love inside. So like when my son is upset or like having a fit, I'll have him feel his love. And so now whenever he sees me, like, I'm like, Max, what did you just do? He's like, Mom, are you feeling your love? Here, let me feel your love. So I share about love a lot with him to the point where he uses it against me.
That's the worst. When they start playing mind games with you, you're like, I'm not sure who's in charge here.
Exactly.
I thought I was top dog, but I'm feeling pretty low right now.
Yeah, I do feel weird sometimes, just because of everything. I always think like, once the pandemic is over, like if I have family and friends come visit, will I put away some of my spiritual paraphernalia or do I leave it out? Like, I don't think I'd hide it, but it's interesting that I can feel that come up sometimes. And with this practice, how has it affected my experience with the peace? Sometimes a part of me is like, you've gone backwards. Like you shouldn't be doing mantras and chanting. But at the same time, it feels different. Although I actively, when I'm watching Nikki chant in the morning, when I'm aware of the chanting happening, there's still a conscious direction of this, whether it's Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, is this presence. It's another name for this love, for this peace. So it's like Nikki is saying it over and over and over again to keep the mind in the heart, to keep it there until I see that it is not there anyway. It's just love here. So it's almost like still like a two-step process where before I started doing the mantra practice, I kind of had an English word mantra, which was not good humanhood, not bad humanhood, Christhood. And as soon as I said Christhood, that would send me into not being here, just love, just presence, just like this invisible, beautiful peace, subtle joy. And so that's still the practice. It's just Sanskrit words that point me to that same place.
That's awesome, man. Go ahead, Corinne.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's experience. Like I can so relate to, I just love you. I'm just totally in love with you and just love how you're sharing and your experience and your ability to articulate it. And also, of course, can see some similarities. And these days I'm just thinking like it's experience, because I used to compartmentalize as well things, right? And that's starting to fall away naturally now. And so now I'm just looking at it as experience. And, if my nature is to still say mantra meditation or chant or whatever, that's just my nature today. That's totally cool. Whatever it is, we can't rush the awakening. The awakening, even though we're already are awake, of course, there is an awareness of the awakeness that is unfolding in most of us. It's not like Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie for everybody, and Ramana Maharshi. And so that's what I've seen for myself, that I'm so now content and blissful with, because I had a lot of, in my 30s, intense spiritual experiences, because I was full on like you were. I was like, I did a 30-day silent retreat in my 20s, and I was like full on with it, right? And then I had actually some chunks of time where I was like I was fully awake, and it was but was like park bench Eckhart Tolle experiences, and then they would fade away. And now, over the past 30 years, it's been this integration of everything, and things falling away at their own time, and things gravitating at their own time. And just this allowing that as soon as I stopped trying anything and judging anything, it just is happening.
Yes, exactly. This morning, I came downstairs and I couldn't see across the bay. It was just like a heavy, dense fog. And I was aware of the thoughts, it's another week. When is this going to happen? What about this contract? This needs to happen. And I remember asking internally, like, what should I be doing? Because it always feels like you should be doing something. I'm like, what do I need to do to get to this next level where I feel happier or more peaceful or whatever? I noticed that. But now when those thoughts come, when desires come, it's easy to see through them. Whereas before, there was complete identification with them. So I now, when any desire comes, I can see Nikki has that desire, but I don't. I said that to Sad Guru, and he's like, "Are there two of you?" And I'm like, "You know what I mean?"
I was just listening to that. Because I met Jaggi. I call him Jaggi. I met Jaggi when he first came to America over 20 years ago, and I hung out with him for about a month. And he's very different now than he was then, and it's just so interesting, the journey that happens and the different ahas along the way, and it's like we'll hear the same thing 10 times. Yep. And then all of a sudden the same, like Sean talks about that all the time. It's like, Sean, I've been telling you that for a while, but
it's like you have the experience, like you said earlier. When you have the experience,
And I completely feel you on that. Nikki identifies with that desire. I don't. And I know the teacher space says, "Oh, there are two of you." It's like, well, we are talking about this, and that's the. And I also feel you on the, family, community background. If they're going to come back into my world and see all this new stuff, and I went from Nashville music industry, spiritual journey, and then I moved back to my hometown with my family. My kids are going to the same grade school, and I had that clash, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. A lot of those same experiences that I think you're talking about, and it took me a while to decompress back into not my truth, but decompress back into truth as it manifested through me. And I think, that's been 4 or 5 years, and I'm kind of at that point. So I feel you on that process. And I think having that practice that you have developed, and having these tools in place, and knowing the inner dialogue that you need to have to keep that space open, that will carry you gracefully through there. I mean, you obviously have an amazing knack for diving in, self-discovery, self-reflection, and you're very present and honest with yourself about all this. And that's a beautiful thing to be. That's a great space to encompass. And I think if you carry that along with you, everything's going to kind of open up with more ease.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that so much. And what I was going to say earlier was how it felt this morning. So I went back upstairs to sit for a little bit longer, and inwardly it came, like just as that fog is going to dissolve, as the sun comes up this morning, all of your confusion, all the thoughts dissolve in this awareness. And so as I sat longer and longer, it was clear. It's like, I don't have to do anything. Like that awareness, that being the fog lifts. And that's what I experienced today. And it was cool to see it. That's the first thing that came to mind when I was looking at it.
That's beautiful, because what I just heard in my filter was before you were talking about, and this still happens to me as well. So and probably still happens to you too. Is like intellectually, you're like, I should do this, and what should I be doing? And you saw through the illusion of that. That's the intellectual understanding, and then you sat in the meditation and felt it just dissolve.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
that's the whole life, every day, every moment. That's it. I get on Zoom calls for business, and I sit and look at the little faces until I remember truth. And then I feel it. And then it's like a game. Everything is like a game to me. So it's like, can I stay in truth for this whole Zoom call? Even when it's my turn to talk about the things I got done.
I feel that, man. That's every day with me. That same thing with this podcast is like, how are you going to not get in the way of whatever truth is trying to come out of this? So, man, you're your own hero, man. It's awesome. I dig it. So
awesome. Thank you.
I mean, I feel like we could talk for a long time, but I know you have another appointment, and I feel so blessed to have connected with you, Nikki. I thank you for taking the time out of your very busy life and to speak so honestly about this, and saying yes. We're very grateful.
Oh, thank you both. I want to hear your stories more. So we're going to have to set up time to just talk offline and chat it up. So I appreciated this time. I appreciate you allowing me to share without a filter, to share my journey, to allow me to be comfortable enough to share, because you don't find many spaces where that's the case. So I appreciate you.
Man, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Maybe we'll all have to go to India and get the skinny on the rest of the 30, 40, however many years we've all been alive.
Yeah.
All right. Until we meet again.
Thank you.
All righty. Welcome to the Say More section with Nikki Walton. I realized I just kicked that off with a all righty, which is about the most Midwestern thing I could do. So I hope you enjoyed that. Man, what a sweetheart. I really enjoyed listening to you guys connect on the teacher background, and, so much commonality and, I don't know, similarities in some of the paths you guys have both taken in your life. But also I really sat with the genuineness and the sincerity of where she's at in her life and in her journey. It was what wonderful space. Yeah.
Yeah, I was humbled by it. I mean, I'm humbled. She's not, she's in her late 30s, so I'm guessing she's probably like 37.
Yeah.
And she has voraciously been a seeker, and reminds me, I guess, a lot of how voracious I was in it. I read every book I could find as well back then in my 20s and 30s. And but she's definitely much more clear than I was at such a young age. I mean, she just is really like, she picks up these tools, kind of like what we talked about with Alea. Like, she picks up these tools, but she doesn't get attached to them, and then she'll lay them down. So we talked a little bit about that, which I really enjoyed. And then that thing we touched on the end was about the mind, noticing the shoulds, right? That was a really great point when she said, I reiterated it because I wanted to make sure that's when she said, yeah, that's what's happening. So basically she was saying, I'll be going about my day and I'll notice, I'd get a little anxiety about, should I reach out to that person, and feeling that. And most people would buy into that and spin out. Mm-hmm. But she's noticing that now, well, that's not, I don't have to believe that thought. I don't have to fan that flame, as Pema Chodron would say. And then that's the intellectual step, right? And then actually sitting in meditation and allowing that to dissolve. And then there's a knowingness, that knowingness in there. So it's just I'm just so in awe of, especially somebody that's been like in the public eye and having a very successful career and then also diving in at the same time. It's not the most common thing.
No, I mean, because, and when you have a business take off that quickly, as it seems, I mean, you know, we say quickly, it sounds like it was over about a 5-year period of time. That's pretty quick to go from, you know, startup to full on, and to get to that level. And there's a lot of things in your life that will bide for your attention, and then kids. And then it's like there's a lot of things that are already distracting us on a normal everyday basis. But when you get to a level like that where you are trying to run your own business, and like she said, there seemed like there was some friction with some business associates, you know, that makes it even harder because you're now checking your shit, you're checking their shit, you're constantly in this state of wondering, you know, whose shit is, who are we dealing with here, if you're paying attention. And to be kind of waking up during that process and then finding a whole nother deep dive after that process, you know, I imagine that was probably pretty freeing for her. I should have asked this. I wish I would have asked that. You know, what did that feel like to, okay, your business is super successful, now you're in a deep dive. That must have felt freeing for her to be able to dedicate that much attention to, you know, her spiritual journey, which we don't often allow ourselves that much space, right?
Not even allow, Sean. Allow maybe for you, that's a good word for you. But I think a lot of people don't value it.
Good point. Yes, good point.
You know, that's the thing is that my job as a, you know, spiritual life coach type of person, I never know what to call myself, is to help people value. So I valued meditation immediately because it cured my ulcer. Yeah. You know, and so that was what maybe, and then I also lived with somebody at the time that was meditating every day. So that helped support that. And then I valued the spiritual journey because I had this insatiable thirst inside. So I made the time. I put all my money towards going to seminars with Deepak, becoming a meditation teacher, becoming a yoga teacher, going on silent retreats every year. Like I valued that. And she obviously values that because she's got this business, she's got her kids. She obviously has a very full life, but she has this inner thirst that seems like a huge priority too. And that's the thing is people, and you know what? It can't be a priority until it arises within you to be a priority, right?
Exactly. And that is very clear is, you know, the business isn't my identity. Even me, Nikki, isn't the identity. My desires, you know, everything, the things I do, the things I should do, you know, you can tell that she has a very strong practice that helps her disassociate with that identity and pulls her back into that space and calling into that. Yes, she has prioritized her spiritual practice above almost everything, maybe not her kids, you know, and that takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of energy. And, you know, there was so many different parts of that conversation where I really felt a lot of the same, you know, pulls. I feel the same pull with the Christianity pull. That has been, it's been a lot of work to get over that inside of me. And I'm not over it. It's still a trigger for me. And like she talked about some of the, you know, her community or the spiritual culture that she has within the Catholic Church isn't necessarily in line with the same, you know, free thought about, you know, she's going to focus on what she's going to focus on because that's what's in her field of view and that's what she's going to bring into her mindfulness practice. That can be somewhat fringe to a dogma or an organized religion. And I liked that she admitted that experience. She has that experience and she wonders if that's going to be more of that once, you know, she can communicate with people, you know, in her space more. But then I also like that she showcased how you can bridge that gap and you can find the common love in all of these teachings. And it's there. It's all available. It's just about how it's being brought to you. It's how you're coming to it and what what you're ready to receive out of any of these messages, really.
And what your desire is. I mean, obviously, if somebody's listening to this podcast, there is a desire, there's a thirst, there's an interest there somewhere. And it's just that level. And I guess maybe, I mean, usually it's the level of suffering. She didn't talk a lot about her suffering. It was more I got from her curiosity.
Yeah.
A thirst and a curiosity, but we might, I don't know, it'd be a good question for her for next time. For me, I had an unquenchable thirst, but I also had a deep pain of wanting to know truth.
A deep pain for wanting to know truth. That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, I think I resonate with, maybe for me, it's an emptiness or a pain of lack of worth. Maybe I feel you on that.
Yeah. If you're going, sorry to interrupt you, but for me, I was like, it was loneliness. It was a desire for truth disguised as loneliness.
Yes. Desire for truth disguised as loneliness. That's a great way to put it, because I think, and maybe what I'm feeling as you said that, is the early part of, the seeking process. I realized I was going to have to do this alone. And that's kind of been my process. Is I don't have teachers. I haven't read a lot of books. I'm not drawn to read a lot of books. I'm more of a hamster wheel kind of method, but I'm also, there's this deep loneliness and feeling like I'm not enough of a company to be with. That has been maybe the biggest struggle or the biggest pain is, well, who the fuck am I and why am I on this anyways, kind of a thing. So yeah, disguised as loneliness.
So yours would be disguised as unworthiness.
Unworthiness, yeah. Oh, for sure. Unworthiness for anything, yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right, I didn't feel that with Nikki. It would be curious to know in the earlier stages if that was present but it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like there was a lot of more just curiosity and
thirst, for sure, thirst.
Oh yeah, when
voracious thirst.
Yeah, and that's a strong mechanism, man. And if you deep dive and you can give yourself that value and the worthiness to deep dive into that, man, it's all there. But then that mindfulness practice of bringing that into a space of peace, I mean, she's done some work, man, for sure. She's done some work to maintain that space, and it shows. I mean, she's thankful, she's humble, but she's powerful. She holds her space in a very, I don't know. It's really just, it was difficult to describe how she did hold that space, but she was just...
It was awareness.
Yeah.
She was consciously aware of, like she said, she's on the Zoom call and she's consciously aware of each person and seeing them as the oneness and the interconnectedness instead of the job that's there to do, instead of and it's a beautiful space to be in and to be able to describe how she's doing that.
And I like that she called it a game.
Yes. Yes, I love that.
That reminds me of who did we talk about not taking your, well, there's been a lot of
Roger was the
Roger, yes. He was don't take this
any of it.
Serious. Yeah, any of this too seriously. And I love that she's introducing that comedy, and she recognizes, like, if anybody knew what I was doing in this moment in my internal world, they'd probably laugh or scold me or whatever. But like, it is a game. How present can you stay and then start observing the mechanisms that try to distract you from being present and mindful in each moment? And it becomes hilarious. It does become hilarious because you're like, why in the world am I having an argument with my grandfather about a skid steer when he's across the country and I haven't actually talked with him, and he hasn't actually interacted with me, but there's just something that penetrates my brain. Obviously, that's a personal motif there, but that's all of a sudden in meditation, you can have a 10-minute conversation with somebody, and this Aaron Brophy and we connected on this, where it's just like, and what's the grace and the gratitude and the humbleness, it offers forgiveness for yourself when you go into those. When you spin out, like you mentioned earlier in the Say More, where it's like, yeah, you get a distraction and you spin out. You know, it's like my dogs do that when they see a squirrel. They're obedient, squirrel, you know, and that's what happens in the mind. And just don't chase the squirrel. It's hard not to chase the squirrel.
Well, you just keep coming back. It's like paper training a puppy.
Yes.
You know, that's how the mind is. We have very undisciplined minds.
Yes, for sure.
We allow our minds, and we're completely unconscious. Most people, you know, allow their mind to go around completely unconscious, darting from one idea to another. And what we're doing, this is what I've mentioned this a couple times before, and I meant to mention this to Nikki, but it's like we do this in our mind to find comfort. Mm-hmm. We're trying to land on a solution, whether it's reliving something in the past or thinking about something in the future. We're trying to land on something that we feel okay with.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and it's just a thought. It has no stability in reality whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, the process that she talked about of I should do this, and I you know, I got to call this person, and then she realizes that, you know, that's those stages of awareness. And that's what being consciously aware in every moment. She describes it as being on Zoom, and it's like, it can be, you can say it as a game or whatever. It's like being aware. And I remember I started doing that, I started realizing there were certain times that I would become kind of unconscious, and that would be like in the shower, brushing my teeth, putting the dishes away fast. And I would always notice other people doing it, but then I started to notice myself, because you can always see when other people are being unconscious in their behavior or their conversation. And but you know, and so something within me just started to say, slow down in these moments.
Yeah.
Slow down. And now it's the opposite. Now I'm super hyper aware in the shower, and when I'm brushing my teeth, when I'm putting the dishes away, gardening, of course, that's like a no-brainer. I mean, that's why gardening is so fun. It's just like so present and so peaceful and consciously aware. And so, yeah, the times, I guess, are becoming less and less that I'm not consciously aware. It's pretty fun.
And that's the process. The process is just staying aware, being mindful,
coming
back. It's this concept of finding enlightenment, and then everything from there on out is changed. That's not what it really is. It's you're constantly discovering that awakened space. You're constantly, obviously, I haven't found it in that moment, but like, it's constantly bringing your presence back to the moment. And I had this last week. It was really strange. It was like I was at the bank and I was just filling out a deposit slip, but I was writing, and there was nothing else but just that deposit slip. And I felt like I was writing for the first time in my life. It was a strange little moment that I had where I felt the pen, I felt the pressure on the paper, I felt everything. And I was just totally in that deposit slip. And it's strange because you have these, it's like, I do this all the time. I write all the time. But am I mindfully writing all the time? That's probably up for debate. and that is the process where I'm in now, is just keep coming back, having more of that presence, having more of that moment of awareness.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, there's a lot more to it, but that's it. That is it, really.
Everything else is story, you know.
It is.
And everything else is thought or story. And I love that she seems to get that. And it seems like she's in a wonderful space to invite that awareness into her life, and that is her value, and that is her primary focus.
Even with being an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
having a podcast, and so many other things, and children.
Yeah.
You can, and that's what Jack Kornfield was talking about in that podcast you love so much. Awareness is available in every moment, not just when you're in a cave in India.
Right.
Or just when you sit down to meditate. Sitting down to meditate helps us. It's like, it's a practice of allowing everything to be as it is.
Right.
That hopefully you start doing in your life every second of every day eventually.
Yeah, man. And there's a lot of other things that you can do, but there's only one present moment. And it seems more fruitful for you and everybody else to keep discovering that moment.
So everybody listening, that's your homework. Keep discovering the moment.
But don't do it because you should.
That's right.
But don't not do it because you should. Do it.
So if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and share it with people and make a comment, because that's how other people find us too.
Yes, and enjoy. I'm going to listen to this one because it was just, I felt with her in this moment. I was feeling a lot of this, what she was talking about, and I appreciate that there's a lot of people out there and that are experiencing this, and I love being able to connect with them. So thank you for finding her. Thank you again, Nikki, for coming on. Till next time, have a great day.